Hey, thanks so much to everyone for coming. Thanks to Alec for inviting me. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And a lot of what we talked about today has been in this realm of how do we make these truly conversational? How do we make them feel human? And as a conversation designer, that's my bread and butter. That's what we're always working towards. So a lot of people have various misconceptions or a shallow understanding of how conversation designers actually work through problems. So I'm going to give kind of a quick lightning talk and show you a couple of examples of how we think through problems and how interconnected a lot of our work is. So quick intro on me, Rebecca Evanhoe here. My pronouns are she, her. I am a conversation designer and consultant and have worked several places, and I do teach at Pratt, which I love, and some of my students are here. Hi guys. So a quick definition of what conversation design is. It's a form of user experience design that is specifically focused on conversational interfaces, which is just technology people talk to, whether they're talking to a device with their voice or whether they're typing to it like a chatbot. So another way to think of it is interactions that are where the primary inputs or outputs are mimicking aspects of human conversation. So sometimes you might talk to something and get a visual response. You might listen to something and type. So it can be multimodal in that way as well. Conversation design has a lot of roots in lots of different fields. Linguistics is a huge component. I don't have a linguistics background, but a lot of the work that we do and a lot of what we know about human speech comes from there. We also draw from fields like anthropology, psychology, writing, that's my background. And I have a couple books here. There's some great books about linguistics and how people talk to tech. Old classics apply, like Elements of Style. And I actually get a lot of good content from NPR's sound reporting textbook. So really interdisciplinary field. So I'll give you a quick snapshot of what we work on. So as I said, conversation design is a form of user experience design, but there's a couple things that we do that are unique to conversational interfaces. So one thing that we design is the personality, or the persona, sometimes people call it, of the system. So Alexa has a personality. A chatbot that you talk to might have an intentional personality. We also do a lot of the writing or help facilitate the kind of prompts that the conversational interface needs to have. We also help curate training data. So what are all these different ways that people can express a need? We help group those, we help tune and train, and we also make flow diagrams that kind of show all the different pathways that a user can take. So these are some pillars of what we do. And I'm gonna show you that they are all interconnected in a pretty deep way. And I think this is the big misunderstanding or a thing that that's maybe not very visible to people, is that when you change one of these pillars, it impacts the others and may also require change. So I'm going to give 3 examples of what that means. So in the first case, let's say I'm a conversation designer and I decide that I'm going to change a prompt, which is something the chatbot says to a user. And that's going to impact actually the training data. So here's what that can look like. In the first example, we'll call it version 1, there's the prompt, what can I help with? So, I open up a chatbot, it says to me, what can I help with? I will probably just give some kind of a full sentence or a phrase about why I'm there, checking my next due date, account balance. I might just say something short like that. But if we change the prompt to, what's your question? That's a cue to me that it's actually asking for a question. And so very instinctively, I'm more likely to phrase my query as an actual question. When is my bill due? How do I make a payment? So that prompt change will sort of impact and probably increase the percentage of people asking in the form of a question, which impacts how we need to account for that in our training data. So we might include all these phrases, but in version 2, we might include more training phrases that are in the form of a question. Case 2, let's say a developer tells me, or we do some testing and we figure out that the algorithm and the system that we're working with works way better when people give short phrases rather than long sentences. So that tells me, we have this algorithm constraint. We know that it works best with short phrases. So my goal is to figure out how I can cue the user to actually use those short phrases. And there are actually 2 ways that I can do that. So I might do a quick little A/B test and see which one of these is more effective in getting users to phrase as a question or use short phrases. So in my first hypothesis, I just say in a few words, what's your issue? That's really nice and concise. Hopefully it's a cue for people that's not overbearing, but there's a question of whether or not it's fully effective. And then in my second example, I give the user samples of things they can say in the format that I want them. So it says, you can say things like, check my balance or schedule a payment. What would you like to do? So that prompt is a lot longer. And there's pros and cons to either approach. But if I'm trying to cue these shorter phrases, then I would try these 2 approaches and see which one actually gives me the result that we're looking, that we're looking for. Case 3. So this happens a lot, and this is a more complex scenario. So let's say we build a product and we figure out through testing or feedback that users are going to respond better to a personality that's warmer, that's less serious. So let's use this specific example. Let's go with a chatbot that is like a diabetes coach. So this chatbot helps you keep track of your blood sugar, your eating, your activity level, sleep, and kind of over time tries to encourage you to do things that are healthy and keeps your blood sugar stable. So on the left is our first version that we figured out wasn't exactly what users wanted. So we'll call it clinical. So the prompt was, hello, time for today's report. What's your most recent blood glucose reading? And the user would say, it's whatever it is. And then the chatbot says, okay, is that reading pre or post-prandial? So like pretty clinical language. Now the ask is that we make this chatbot friendlier. So of course that's gonna have me rewrite the prompts. So in a friendlier version, it might say, hi again, let's see how you're doing today. What's this morning's blood sugar reading? And they would say it. Okay, and had you eaten breakfast yet? So those are much more casual ways of asking the same questions. So in this friendlier version, I've updated the prompts to reflect the new personality, but other things are going to change too. So with the clinical version, the user is much more likely to use shorter phrases, kind of clipped. They are more likely to echo back the specific language, like the kind of the jargon that the bot is using, because it gives them the sense that they have to also use this clinical language. And I would suspect that in this clinical version, somebody would use it as little as possible, just sort of like, okay, I'm just going to put my stuff in and let it go, because it doesn't feel like a relationship. So in the friendlier version, the user's likely to be a little bit chattier because the bot is communicating that. And this is based on like the linguistic concept of accommodation, where when we talk to people, we change how we talk, our gestures, all kinds of things in response to them. And it happens with virtual things as well. So when we have this friendlier version, the user is going to start to participate in and even mirror that friendliness. So they might also use more casual language. And I would also suspect that because they feel like it's friendlier, maybe more helpful, it's more of a relationship that they're building, they might have more curiosity about the other features. So you can see how changing the personality takes us through changing the dialogue, takes us through changing the training data, and can also change user behavior in general that might give us a reason to add additional flowchart pathways. So hopefully that gives you a sense of, when you're working with the conversation designer and you ask for a dialogue change or to change something about the persona, it really does weave its way through the entire experience. And that's how you get a very conversational human experience, is by making the experience support the user throughout all of these pillars. So I'll end here. You can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Twitter. Appreciate your time. Maybe we have time for some questions, we'll see. And then I'll tell you that I'm writing a book. And if you want to sign up to find out when it's coming out in 2021, you can go to Rosenfeld Media. And then I'll also leave this slide up for a second if anyone wants to screen cap it. These are the books that I really like for conversation design. Some of them are old, some of them are pretty new, but just if you are curious about interdisciplinary reading, here's a list. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. We had a question from Chris around using generative responses in day-to-day right now, and how kind of see this going forward with GPT-3 coming out and other systems that are a little more cross-domain. If you can kind of speak to where you see this kind of going in the future.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, this is such an interesting question because given what I've just talked about, a lot of the prompts, a lot of the things that these interfaces are saying back to the user are written by a person in advance. And when you're working with NLG systems, the system is actually constructing the response. I definitely think that NLG is where the future is headed, but I do see conversation design remaining a part of that process, right? Because we're still dealing with a persona, we're still interacting with training data, and maybe we're not the one constructing the prompt or the response, but we have a benchmark for whether that response is actually hitting whether the content is correct, whether the persona is correct. So there's an element of conversation design kind of continuing to assess and tune the NLG prompts as well.
Thank you. We got another question from Joe, who in a similar fashion is asking around open domain conversational AI, such as Facebook's Blender, and what you see the market for this to be, and how that will, make it challenging for these kind of conversational designers, since there's such a wide range of topics in a platform like Facebook.
So yeah, I mean, the question of, is the question sort of are conversation designers going to become obsolete?
I would never want that. I guess it's really around how do you prioritize certain topics or cultural norms or geographic components when you are designing these very broad conversational designs across a huge platform like Facebook.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is such a huge question that I would encourage you to check out my book in 2021, not for self-promotion necessarily, but because this is such a huge topic. How do we design in ways that aren't biased? How do we design for different groups of people? In general, I think user experience design is the pathway to designing for different types of users, right? I think we really look out for different needs, different scenarios, people with different abilities. So I would like to see UX sort of more heavily focused on in general conversational interface, the whole field. Because I think a lot of companies are approaching it as like a technical issue, but a lot of the humanness that we're trying to get at, I think you can only get to through like user experience design.